Well, here we are at the corner of Casimir Road and 2nd Street North. With us is Frank Gollonik and Marcy Pelowski. We are going to begin our tour of the area around St. Casimir's right now, with Frank being our tour guide and filling us in on families and, in fact, our own families along with friends that came from the village of Gulch in Poland. So we're going to start right here with Frank telling us just a little bit about a dance hall that was located in this very area. Here we are, and Frank is going to tell us the story that starts right here by Hay Meadow Creek. Okay, Frank, what have you got to say about this area?
Well, I would say that I'll go back about 72 years ago. The way I remember it, right here in this spot was a dance hall, and right across the street was a tavern, and that was August Walkus was running the tavern. And I was to this dance hall twice that I can remember. I was here with my dad, and one time,
is
as
this
I
the
remember,
dance hall on the left or on the right?
on the left-hand side.
Okay, you were to this dance hall twice.
Yeah. And once I remember, there were people around here on the street, but I don't remember any people dancing. However, a police officer, he came and he said, he ordered a party out. He says, "Get out of here." And the man says, "Why?" He says, "If you want to stay, I'll go and take that rifle out of your car and smash it, then you can stay. But if you don't want me to smash that rifle, get out." And that's about all I can remember.
So they carried guns in those days too, huh?
Yes, whether the man left or didn't leave, I don't know. I just don't remember.
Was it like a barn? The building, do you remember the building? Was it somebody's home or?
I would say no, it was a regular dance hall. It was a regular dance hall. But like I say, I was here twice, and I don't remember people dancing, and I might have been 6 or 8 years old.
You don't know who owned that dance hall?
No, I don't. Except the tavern that was owned by August Walkus.
Now, in my day, which would be in the 1930s, I remember that particular place, going there and having something to eat. My parents stopped there once in a great while. In fact, I remember having a very good pork chop dinner. It was like being in somebody's house, but it was called the Sunset at that time.
Yes, after Walkus quit the tavern, then I believe Felix Zinda took it over. And that was named the Sunset or Sunrise.
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 Sunrise,
yeah.
that's
that
right.
was named the Sunrise.
You're
yeah.
right, you're right.
And later, we had a hardball team. And we had a baseball diamond right in that area that would be west of the Sunrise. And I remember we went to Felix Zinda and we asked him if he could kind of help us out a little bit financially towards the baseball team.
Oh.
And he did give us $5.
Oh, that was a lot of money in that time.
In those days it was a lot of money, but anyway, we played just about every second week on that diamond, because we'd play one home game and then we'd go out and play like Mill Creek and Ashley and Custer and so on. And those days there were no softball games, it was all hardball.
I know my Uncle Tommy used to play baseball an awful lot.
He was a catcher.
He was.
He was a wonderful catcher. Yeah.
And then Jimmy would play sometimes, but it was Tommy that was the baseball player.
Yeah, and so was Sam.
Oh, Sam too?
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, Frank, you played too, didn't you?
I played shortstop for about 10 years.
Oh.
And we used to have a ball diamond right to your grandparents' house down that way. And it was a nice diamond, and I remember a baseball team out of town, they called themselves the Boundary Nine. They came down on bicycles.
Oh,
And we had about...
I can remember my father's brother, Uncle John, who worked with betters. They had a betters team,
Oh, yeah.
and he would come down and play too.
Yeah.
So it really was a very good activity for
Yeah, anyway, we played, as a matter of fact, my dad, he played baseball
Oh.
when he was younger. And the interesting thing was that he was a catcher, and he sewed his own catcher's mitt. And when we started to play, every now and then, Dad would go and play the outfield for us whenever we were short of players. And wish I had that baseball mitt now, but we used to leave it outside and the dogs chewed it up.
Was it right from your own leather, huh?
Yes,
yeah. Right from
yeah.
scratch.
It was quite artistic, I would say, for being handmade.
Okay, well, thank you, Frank, for this introduction. We'll move on to the next. Okay, what we're looking at right now, actually, is a junk yard, a car yard, and Frank is going to tell us who used to live here and a little bit more about this place. It's just about a quarter of a mile down from the Walkush Sunrise Cafe. So, Frank, if you want to just tell us a little bit more about this area.
Right here where this house is standing.
Okay.
There was a family that lived there by the name of Rimpala. And they had 3 children, as I recall. And some of the children were attending St. Casimir School. And one of the girls died when I was about in 3rd grade. And then right across the street here, I don't know if we can see the house or not.
Okay, just a moment,
Right
Frank.
behind those trees.
And just cross the road across from Rampala's.
Their house down that way.
And there was a house in this nest of trees. And this house belonged to who, Frank?
That belonged to Kashupskis. And they had about 5 children. And the Kashupskis and the Rimpalas, they strictly were Polish people. I never heard them speak one word of English. And both of these families, they had maybe 2-3 cows, and Kashupskis had a team of horses, whereas Rimpala, they had about a couple cows, but I don't remember them having any teams of horses. And that's about
the gist of the families that lived in this area.
Yeah, that was Rimpala that lived here.
Okay. Okay.
Frank, stand close to the camera because if the wind blows, your voice gets moved away. So stand right at her shoulder when you talk.
Okay, we've left the Rampala homestead area, and now we're coming to the homestead of Dominic Shuda, one of the brothers, I believe, of Gertrude. And that the foundations of that homestead are still to be seen right in this area. And I can remember as a little girl coming here with Mom and Dad and spending some afternoons sitting on this front porch, which only the foundation is left. And now Frank is going to tell us a little bit about the Dominic Shuda residence.
Okay, Dominic Shuda, there was a family of 6 children, and I remember that Dominic had a team of horses, and he was a war veteran, the First World War, And anyway, I went to school with all the children, and then during the Second World War they kind of moved away, and I kind of lost track of most of them.
Okay, thank you for that, Frank. Church, which was the church of our grandparents, Golloniks, Czerwinskis. They were baptized here, married here, and buried in this lovely church in the town of Hull, St. Casimir's. And now we're going to have a little interview with Marcy asking Frank some questions. And we're going to have Frank sharing a little bit of what he knows about this area.
Okay, I'd like to stand at your shoulder so you can pick up our voices. Come here, Frank. And you might like to just, instead of taking my picture, just do something with the church or so. Anyway, Frank, my question was, and you answered it already, do you remember the new church being built? And you already said that it burned down the year you were born.
Yes.
And you were baptized in the parsonage. I was trying to think. I saw pictures of this church with very few statues. It was a new church. And I'm wondering, did they add statues? Can you ever remember them adding the statues? Or do you think they were there very close to the beginning?
I would say that if I am correct on this, that Liz Shuda donated the statues, but what year it was, I don't remember, but I do remember that she donated those statues.
So it would be a few years after the church was built.
Oh, definitely, yes.
Yeah. Interesting thing, I'm looking at this picture of the first church, and I notice that it looks very much like this from the side, except there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 windows, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 windows here. Do you think this was the church that was called the Little Chapel, or do you think there was a smaller building before the first real church was built?
No, I don't remember.
Don't know.
No. The only thing I remember is this church.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about the school. You went to school here with the nuns.
Well, not only that I went there, but let's put it this way, my dad went to this school, and the nuns were teaching. And then, after some time, the school was closed. And when Father Gruna was pastor here, that is the time that this school was reopened. And anyway, I used to go to the Stony Ridge School, but when this school reopened, it was only a distance of about 3/4 of a mile, whereas up to the Stony Ridge it would be about 1.5 miles. So as a matter of fact, then I started attending this school over here. And
Just a moment, Frank. You want to get in front of me and then I can get you talking a little bit?
okay.
Thank you. Just
Let's see.
there. That's good, Frank. Okay, you can talk about the school.
And the interesting thing about this school, that my grandfather hauled the rocks for the basement of this school. And my dad was telling me that at the time he was going to this school, he was serving Mass. And he done something wrong. So after Mass, the nun put him in a room, and she made him stay there for a certain length. But Dad says, shucks, he says, I just jumped out through the window and went home.
Sounds like a good idea and a good story. Okay,
Yeah.
I was going. The reason I was, well, actually, you answered one of my next questions. Was, does your father go to school? I heard that my grandmother, who was your father's sister, that would be
Yes.
Margaret Gollonik,
Yeah.
married to Stanley, also went to this school. My grandparents used to tell me that Grandma went to school here. How many grades did they have? Was it like 1st to 8 or 1st to 6?
Well, at that time, when my dad went to school here, I don't know how many grades they had, but when I started, they had 8 grades.
8 grades.
And the beauty part is, not that I want to bring this out so cheerfully, but I skipped the 4th grade, I skipped the 6th grade, and I think that's it.
But
I skipped 2 grades. But anyway, after the school was reopened, one of my sisters was the first one to graduate after the school reopened.
After Father Gruna, huh? Yeah.
And there were 3 graduates, and I can't think of the other 2 girls, but one of my sisters graduated after the school was reopened, and she was one of the first ones to graduate.
About how many years? No, let's see. I lost my question. Jane wanted to know which sister graduated.
That was Leona.
Leona.
Yeah. I remember there used to be a real big sliding door. There were 2 rooms, and when the sliding door would be open, it would be more like 1 room. And I don't know if it's still here or not, but anyway, when I went here, many times we'd open the big wide door and we'd have like a 1 room.
That was my question too. I was thinking, how many children would go here at a time?
Well, I never did count them, but I would say that we had anywhere around 50 thereabout. Yes, 50,
and
60.
They would start school at 6 years old or maybe 8?
Those days, there were no snow plows. The roads were never plowed out. And usually the children started a little bit later than they do today. And occasionally, the day was just perfect in the morning, but when it was for the time for the children to go home, it would be snowing, and their parents would come with a team of horses and pick up the children. But that was far and in between.
Yeah.
But some of the children really had a great distance to walk, and you never had any snow plows those days.
And then I also think there would be children who would be going to school who would be older, because you could almost enroll any time you wanted and
Yes,
keep
I would
going.
say so.
I would say maybe even into their teens if they wanted
Yeah.
to, especially maybe before your time. I would say maybe in our grandparents' time that they would come.
But we had a lot of people that moved in here from Chicago and Milwaukee, and these children would come to school. And many of those people that did come here, they couldn't make it, so they went back. They sold the place and went back. Many of them.
I was also thinking about when you went to school. I was here with Wanda Stroine sometime last summer, and we were talking about the crosses, and she was telling me that there were 3 crosses, one by the church, one by the entry to the cemetery, and one in the middle of the cemetery. And she said they used to use them as stations for processions, like at Corpus Christi or something.
No, that I don't
Do you
remember.
remember any of the crosses being here?
I don't remember
You don't
the crosses.
remember the crosses.
No.
They were like roads. Do you remember the road sign cross, the cross that was right in front of
Yes,
church?
I remember this one, and then one up the road here.
Right up the road
Yeah.
here, yeah.
And here's another interesting thing that just happened to think of, is when Father Gruna was pastor, then there were picnics once a year. And the funniest thing was that people would bring in a lot of different things like rabbits, chickens, a goat, calves, and once a horse.
Oh.
Now, somebody won that horse on a raffle. And of course, I didn't stay for the evening. I went home, but my dad was telling me that during the evening they had a dance in the schoolhouse. And they led that horse up the steps on the hall, on a dance hall. So
Sounds like they were having a good time.
yes.
I
The
think they
end
were-
of the night and everybody
Right.
had enough beer to drink.
Yes, yeah.
When you mentioned Father Gruna, it made me think, I believe he was the priest here who was marrying the girls in our family, like my Aunt May and my mother Helen and my Aunt Doris
Yes,
got
I
married
would
here.
say so.
And
yes.
I know he married my parents.
Yeah.
And he seemed to be a favorite priest.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he had a good, strong voice, and he could really preach a good sermon. And I'm sure that everybody heard him too.
I can remember the picnics as a little girl, and this had to be before 1940, because we would come down here, and I can remember the ladies, and of course I always remember my grandmother. They're cooking and they're bringing out soup just like they do today. And farmers, of course, would have to donate all the food, huh? And
Yes, yeah.
and the ladies get out there and cook. And I imagine your mother was out there cooking and serving too.
And when these picnics, when they first started, there was no bingo. They had raffle tickets, and they would, I remember the bigger girls, they would walk around and sell a whole sheet of these tickets. Then they would spin the wheel, and whoever was the lucky one would win the prize. But no bingo those days.
So mainly it was party or getting together, visiting, and
I would
food.
say so.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
And then dance, of course, to be connected with it. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Frank, for that. That was very interesting. Now, as we are getting back to go into our cars, Frank mentioned the fact that right in this area, just before the schoolhouse, was a pump.
Yes.
And I'll let Frank continue
And,
on with that story.
Just about every day, one of the nuns that was the cook, she'd come with a water pail and she'd ask the boys to carry the water for her upstairs. Well, we'd carry about 5-6 buckets, and that would last maybe for a day or two. And then right next to this schoolhouse was a woodshed. The parishioners were asked to bring a load of wood because that was the only way to heat the schoolhouse. There was a big, what I'd call a pot-belly stove, and the children would bring coffee in a regular bottle. There was no such thing as thermos bottles those days. And they would go to work and set those bottles of coffee right next to the stove, kind of in a round circle. And the bigger boys, they would come and push the cork as tight as they could. And when these bottles would kind of get warm up, every now and then one of those corks would go up like a bullet. And as this wood was being brought in for this school, it was put on a pile, and then it was up to the children to pile this wood into the woodshed. And I remember the girls were piling it and the boys were piling it, and who knew how to pile wood? And at one time, those piles were almost to the ceiling, and there were about 5 of those wood piles, and they all tumbled down. It could have been a disastrous thing, because one of the blocks of wood fell on my head, and of course it didn't knock me out, but anyway, from that time on, one of the nuns would always come during lunch hour, noon hour, and she'd kind of supervise piling of this wood.
Now, you mentioned that the parishioners all had to bring a load of wood every year
Yes,
as a donation?
a load of wood. They were asked to bring a load of wood, and that would be the wood that was used for the schoolhouse, and wood that would be used for the church, and also to heat the parsonage.
Ah.
And I remember my dad, he'd always bring a load every year. And then at one time, they brought regular big logs, big long lengths, and they would hire a saw rig and they would saw it up into chunks of wood. And those that didn't bring any wood, they were supposed to come and help saw this wood. So, but anyway, the schoolhouse was always warm enough, so was the church and no doubt the parsonage.
Thank you, Frank.
Frank, did you go talk to Audrey? Say that. Where are you again?
Tommy Gillespie's house.
Okay. And this is very close to the church, isn't it?
I think it's the first farm next to the church, isn't it, Frank?
Yeah. What can you tell us about this farm, Frank?
Well, there was a party living here by the name of Yatra, and they had two children.
Would you spell that, Frank?
W-A-T-R-I-A-K. They had two children, and of course those days work was hard to find, and one of the boys got a job on the high seas on a freighter, and during storm he got lost at sea, and the first house that the Yatra lived in that burned down, and I remember John Luca. When this house was burning and the smoke was up in the air, he was coming down on a horseback, and that horse was really going. That's the first time that I saw really a horse with a rider on it and going so fast. And anyway, this Yatra, he built this house, and Mrs. Yatra telling mother that when he's building, that everything has to be just so. You will not nail a board if it's a little bit off. And then, oh yes, this Yatra, he had a Model T Ford, and I just don't remember the year, the model it was, but anyway, the lights had to be lit with a match.
Oh.
They used carbide in the lamp, in the headlamp, and if you wanted to go at night, you had to take a match and light it, and that was the way people traveled at night those days, those that had a car.
Did your family have a car at that time?
The first car that we had was in 1928.
Oh.
Yeah, and that already was more advanced. It had regular lights, but I sure wish I would have had.
Interesting thing about this farm, when I went to the village of Gulch in Poland, and I was asking for names of family that might have lived there, and I mentioned the name Gollonik or Kovaleski, and this little lady that was visiting, And that picture was said to have come from his cousin in Stevens Point. So I treasure that because it was fascinating to see in this village of Goose a picture of Tony Zaleski and Constance Gollonik. And I guess I look at that barn and I've got a question, Frank. Have you any idea why the foundation was so high? And could those perhaps have been stones that were dug out from your farm?
Don't remember the stones being set in. Maybe they were, and anyway, I don't remember. I don't know anything about that.
Thank you for taking that off.
Thank you. I hope you have it all. Turn it off. Okay. I couldn't tell. There's a lot of shadows in here. What's going to happen to the film, do you think? And there's no color showing.
The color doesn't show.
Okay.
The color doesn't show.
And a lot of shadows.
Now, these two homes were built very recently, so I don't think we need
No,
to
we're
do
not
anything
interested
about
in
that
those.
unless you want to.
No.
That's Tommy Zaleski's daughter lives there.
Oh.
Yeah,
Right here or back there?
the back one. Yeah.
Oh, the
Here I don't
beautiful
know who
log
lives.
cabin.
This is Henry Winkler.
Yep.
Now, there was a house on this field over here. I don't remember the house, but one of the old timers, a fellow by the name of Jekyll, Mike Jekyll, he told me that there was a house here. And who lived here, I don't know. And that house I don't
Okay.
remember.
There was a house
Yeah,
in this field,
yeah.
right
This field.
across from the new home of Hank Winkler almost.
Now, is that the big house, is that Hank Winkler's house?
No, that is that automobile mechanic that you see advertised on television that fixes Dave's Body Shop.
Oh.
That's
Dave's
Dave.
Body Shop.
He owns that big new house there. I don't know his last name.
Now, just go slow over here. Just go slow. Go farther up. Go further up. Now you can kind of stop over here now, right here. Now right here was a house. People by the name of Wojtanowskis lived there.
Okay, that name we've
And
seen.
they had no children. They were kind of, I would say, an old couple. And their biggest problem was getting downtown with someone. And they had one cow, and they would kind of gather the cream, and they would haul that cream downtown and sell it, provided that they got somebody to kind of give them a lift that way.
Oh.
And then he passed away, and finally she passed away. And then the buildings were dismantled because the piece of land that they lived on that belonged to Dominic Shuda. And after they died, Dominic Shuda dismantled all the buildings.
Oh. And there's nothing left to indicate that they were there. No foundations, nothing.
No. They had 2 wells, and I hope those wells are filled in. And then right here where that driveway is, you can partially drive into the driveway. Right here used to be, now whether it's Stanislav's or Nick, I just don't remember, but I think it's Stanislav's Gollonik. Do you remember any Gollons, any names?
Got them written down, but
I think it is Stanislav Gollon.
The only one I really remember.
Oh yeah, I got it written here. There were 6 in the family. One of the sons married your grandma's sister. He married
okay, that was Vic Gollon.
Anna Gollonik.
Anna.
He married. That would be your grandma's sister. Yeah. And
Wait,
that was
wait.
Victor Gollon
Victor Gollon was a son.
of Stanley Gollon, and they lived here.
Wait, I've got his birth record from Poland. I believe he was a son of Nick Gollon.
That I wouldn't know.
Yeah, Victor was a son, well, that's beside the point.
It could be Nick Gollon, and Stanley could have been his father. Maybe it's that way, but
Nick
anyway.
Gollon's father died in Poland.
Whose father?
Nick Gollon, the old man.
Oh. died in
Okay,
Poland.
is this next to your house? Is this farm next to where the Gollonik farm
Yes,
is?
yeah.
Okay, Mother said that they were like cousins because your family used to take care of them. It wasn't Nick Gollon. She said somebody else, but they came from Poland and they were very poor, and they needed help sometimes.
There was such thing as another house was there. It's not there anymore, and that was Gollon. But I don't remember his first name because everybody called him Stria. Stria Gollon.
Uh-huh.
So I don't know his first name, and I don't know this guy's first name, but I've got it written Stanley. It could have been Nick. It could have been Nick. Anyway, there were 6 children,
Okay.
and Vic Gollon was his son.
Okay, then it's Nick.
Then it's Nick Gollon.
Nick Gollon, yeah.
Okay, then it's
Vic
Nick.
Gollon was his son,
Okay.
and Vic Gollon married your
Anna
mother's-
Gollonik, right.
Yeah.
And then they adopted Margaret Buza.
Yes.
Well,
yeah,
Margaret
yeah,
Rice.
Yeah.
And Stria was the person who lived here.
This was, let's say that this was Nick Gollon.
Nick Gollon.
And the other house,
Okay.
Gollon, by the
Okay.
name, we all called him Stria,
Okay.
and I don't know his first name.
Okay. Is Stria like uncle or cousin or?
What relationship he was,
Yeah,
he was
no.
not related to us.
Okay.
And then in those marshes lived Andrew Gollon and Paul Gollon. You can keep going. I'll show you where the buildings were. See, right about here was a house, and that was Stria Gollon.
Okay. That's what Mother said.
And
Yeah.
he was kind of an older person, and he was quite a hunter. And he had like a barn, and you could call it a woodshed or a machine shed. But anyway, upstairs there was a little door that he'd open up, and in the wintertime he'd go hunting rabbits, and he'd always have 4 or 5 rabbits hanging in that little opening. And once now and then there would be only 3, he'd eat one. There would be only 2, he'd eat one. And he was quite a hunter, and he also would go and pick hazelnuts. I saw him carry a full sack full on his shoulder, hazelnuts. And oh yeah, once he got a coon, so he came to our house, and he'd ask Mother to come and see the coon, and I went with Mom. And he said that he'll clean it up and he eats that coon. And also during the First World War, he'd come to our house every day to read the Polish paper because he wanted to read the war news. And he done that for a few years that I remember. And I remember he'd sit on a chair with his legs crossed, and one of the the foot would kind of bounce it back and forth. That I remember. And then there was a road right here, and that road went to Indra Gollonik's house, and it also went to Paul Gollonik's house. Now, how those Golloniks were related to this here, I don't know, but anyway, Paul, the unfortunate thing was he was such a poor man. At one time he was going with a team of horses on ice, and the ice broke and the team of horses drowned, and lucky he didn't drown. Anyway, the people around town, around the square, they made a collection and they bought him another team of horses. But then later on, he was so poor and there were so many children that they came, the welfare or whoever, and they took some of those children away from him. Yeah. And let's see, and Joe Gollonik. Yeah, this Joe Gollonik, I have 6, but he had more than 6 children. And also, there was Paul Gollonik, and yeah, there was Paul Gollonik, and there was, I think, Joe Gollonik. One of the fellows got kicked by a horse and he died from it. And well, that's about all I can remember
Frank,
about them
we were
Golloniks
once
over there.
told that this was the home of Nick Gollonik.
Yes, at one time he lived in a number of places. At one time he lived here, yeah. And I remember he had apple trees, and I still see some apple trees standing there. Yeah. And then this was our place over here. I don't know if you want to drive in there, see if anybody
I
is
think
home.
we should hear.
And then you can tell us a little bit about this place.
And
I've been here before, and if the lady's home, she knows me. She was very nice, the people that bought this. And we'll just kind of park here, and
I'll see if she's home.
okay.
Pencil and mark this cassette so I don't run them over. I'm gonna bring a pencil.
I think I'll park down off the driveway so the car isn't in the picture. I'll get some.
Why didn't you take any pictures of the cemetery?
because we have pictures of the cemetery, Jan. Now let's see. I want to line this, or unless you
Do I
want to line
have to go out there and
Sure, I'll let you get out, Marcy. This must bring back memories for you. Here we are at the Frank Gollonik homestead. I shouldn't say Frank, John Gollonik, Joseph Gollonik homestead, and Frank is here to tell us a little bit about the place where he was born and raised. And this too brings back many memories of stopping here with Mom and Dad and visiting, and of course going off in the woods to pick blackberries. And it was just a nice place to spend some time on a Sunday afternoon. And what we're going to do is let Frank tell us a little bit about this very quaint, lovely place where his mother and dad raised many children. Okay. Here is Frank kind of walking back, reminiscing what it used to be to walk through these fields work in the barn. Okay, Frank, maybe you can tell us a little bit about your place here in the country.
This area over here stood a big hay barn. And the interesting thing was that those days they built a big hay barn and there wasn't a nail or spike in it. It was all wooden pegs, and it was kind of, the logs were hewn, and it was kind of fitted, interlocked, and boy, that hay barn, we'd always have it filled up with hay for the winter, and also grain. We'd haul in the oats and rye, and then a thresh machine would come and thresh it. So we had enough grain for the cattle during the winter. And right this way, we had 40 acres of woods, timber, and we used to cut a lot of wood, and we'd haul it in onto the yard here, and these were long pieces, and then we'd hire a saw rig to have it sawed into chunks, and then we'd split that, pile it. We'd have 5, 6, 8 piles of wood that would season before we'd sell it, and we'd haul it downtown with a team of horses to sell it. And from the beginning, we'd get $2.50 a load, and then in later years we'd get $5 a load. But all in all, there would be 70 acres of land over here, and of course 40 were woods and some were swamp, and we had about 28 acres that you could plow and cultivate and raise crops. And we had 6 head of cattle, because we couldn't have any more because there was enough pasture for them. But all in all, I will say that there never was a dull moment. And if anything, I enjoyed hunting a lot. We'd come home from school and we did the chores as quick as we could, and if there was any time left, I'd just grab the gun and take a walk in the woods. And that was one of my greatest enjoyment on this farm here. It was hunting.
Tell me a little bit about your parents. They lived here till an old age, didn't they?
Yes. The grandparents came from Poland. They had 6 children. 4 were born in Poland and 2 were born here. My dad was born here, and Walter.
Ah.
And of course, Dad was always okay.
I was asking you, I said, of course, your folks lived here for many years, through their whole lifetime, and you told us about your grandparents a little bit, and I forgot exactly where we stopped. Maybe you remember.
Well, I said that the grandparents came from Poland, and 4 were born in Poland and 2 were born here. Dad was born here and Walter was born here. And in my family, or in John Gollonik's family, there were 12 children. And I will say that even if there were 12 children, I never went hungry. There was always enough that everyone had enough to eat. And in that respect, we were very lucky, even if the family was quite large.
And that, of course, is because they raised everything on this farm?
Yes, yeah.
And your father never worked in town?
No, no. He made a living on this farm, and I will say one thing, though, that really helped him was during the First World War. He had a crop of potatoes, and the potato prices were so high. I don't know just how old I was, maybe 6 years or so, but I remember Dad was hauling in the potatoes downtown, and he got paid in money, paper money, like dollar bills. And Mom had a pillowcase filled with these bills. And at one time she showed me that pillowcase and she says, "This is all money. We're gonna take this to the bank." And that 1 year helped my dad to carry him throughout the rest of his life. That one good potato
year.
crop.
Huh. How old was your father when he died?
86.
And your mother?
And Mom was about 90, 91.
Ooh, I remember visiting her, yes.
And this silo over here, I helped my dad build it. I think it was built in about 1929. And it is built very strong. We built it up about 4 feet and we took barbed wire and we made, we went and put it all the way around and then build again 4 or 5 feet higher and take barbed wire and put it around so it makes it good and strong. And I see till this day it didn't crack, not in one place that I can see. And the garage, when the garage was built, I asked Dad to build a pit. And anyway, he built a little bitty one, and I was kind of slim and small, and I could always crawl into that pit and do a little repair work on the cars. And that really is something that I appreciate very much.
Tell me, can you remember your grandfather?
No.
He
No.
was already gone when you were young.
From father's side, mother's side, I don't remember. One of them, from my mother's side, they passed away in 1915. So that would be, I was born in 13, I'd be 2 years old, but I don't remember that.
Do you remember apple trees and the well here at all?
Yes,
using
there
it?
was a pump and an orchard. There was a pump right about in that area, and then we had an orchard, apples and plums and so on.
Because I think it was Ann Helen that remembers your grandfather, and she said, I can still see him, he'd be sitting under the apple trees just kind of resting. He was a nice man, but he was just kind of in his later years, and he'd be always under the apple trees.
No doubt.
Right. And Mother remembers because she was born in 1904, so she was a youngster coming to visit him here. Mm-hmm.
One more interesting thing, when the thresh machine would come and when the wood machine would come to saw the wood, I know that perhaps it's your Aunt May and Helen, and yeah, they would always come and help out during threshing time to prepare the meals.
Mm-hmm.
So the mother really appreciated that. And this woodshed over here, when we were cutting wood, all the limbs were put on a separate pile, and the thicker logs and that would be on their pile, but these limbs we chopped by hand with an X, and any wood that was kind of half rotted or so, that everything was put in this woodshed for our own use, whereas the good wood we would take it downtown and sell.
Okay, thank you, Frank. Here across the road we see Nick Gollonik's old homestead with that beautiful silo and barn. And here's the house, totally remodeled, but still as quaint in its little way as it used to be in years gone by. We have Frank looking over what used to be what we have here is the home of Joe Shuda, or the area, and this was the barn, and there was where the house stood. Hey Frank, perhaps you could tell me a little bit about this area. And there we have what was the Joe Shuda barn, and where the house stood was right there. Now, tell me a little bit about this family.
Well,
Frank?
Joe Shuda, he was always doing something, and one of the things that he would do, he'd make like X handles and hammer handles and whatnot. He had woods, and he'd use hickory to make those handles out of. And every time that he'd take a load of wood downtown to sell, he was saying that he'd make more money selling those handles than that load of wood. And anyway, the house here was pretty small, and Mrs. Shuda would tell my mom that they're kind of crowded, so what they did, they made a bed that would slide under another bed. So at night they just pull it out so the children have somewhere to sleep on. During the day they push the bed back in again. And then I remember, oh yeah, during the First World War, there was something like scarlet fever or some type of sickness, and in 1 month's time, 3 of the Shuda sons were buried within a month. And I remember those days, anybody would die, they'd keep that body in the house, and this was in the winter time, and I would watch, I'd sit in a window and I'd see the funeral procession go by, all horses and sleds. And then later on, Mrs. Shuda died, and Joe remarried, and there were 2 stepsons. Their name was Early, Ed and Romy Early. And I remember we had a 1926 Ford car, and at one time it didn't want to start, so I just came here, and one of the boys came and he fixed the car. And anyway, then after those, Mr. Shuda died, and one of the boys, or both of the boys were in service. When they got home, one died, and then the other one died shortly after that, and then the farm got sold to this present owner, Mr. Butkus.
Can you tell me a little bit about the river here? Is this near Council Bluff? Because I noticed the barn is practically right.
This is not Council Bluff. No, Council Bluff you would find from Highway 10 across the river.
I see.
Yeah.
How about the river here? Is this running into the Wisconsin River? I'm not sure how this water runs. Or is this
it's just
it's a
the
slough?
backwater
It's
from
a
the Wisconsin River. Yeah.
But it's not the main channel.
Well, we left the Joe Shuda homestead, and now we're down by the Red Bridge. We've just gone past the Alexander Shuda homestead, and we have Frank and Marcy with us again, and we're going to hear a little bit about this area.
Well, we're looking at the old swimming hole.
Which
was the place with the beautiful lily pads?
Okay, which one? Where was that, Marcy?
Right over here, Frank was saying.
To my left?
Behind you, down where the boats come in.
Oh, this is the old swimming hole? And who used to come swimming here, Frank?
Well, the entire neighborhood, I would say.
The entire neighborhood.
And we'd have more spectators than swimmers sometimes. Yeah.
Did you have your suits?
Oh yes, yeah.
Now, right across from here, in the very earliest times, can you remember who owned that land?
Okay, that land was owned by John Ruta. Now, my dad bought 30 acres of land from John Ruta. And there used to be a road past this bridge to the left that we'd get down to that 30 acres of land. But as time went by, the paper mill raised the dam, built the dam a little bit higher, and part of that land would be flooded. Then after a few years again, they would raise the dam a little bit higher, and more of that land was flooded. And towards last, we only had about 5-6 acres that we cut hay on it. Now, this old bridge, we used to call that the Red Bridge, and it had rails that were maybe 7 feet tall. And one of the boys, by the name of Joe Kaszubski, he'd walk on his hands on top of that rail. And I'm telling you that as much as he walked, he never lost his balance.
Huh.
And at one time, Louis Koszmicki was here swimming. And Louis jumped off from the bridge into the water, and he dislocated his shoulder. And fortunately enough, there was a boat, and we got the boat and we got him on land, and anyway, we saved him that way. But Sam Sherwinski and Tom and Jim, we considered those three, especially Jim, that they were really powerful swimmers. And they were speed swimmers.
Oh.
Yeah. And we used to climb up on those rails and we'd dive in. And it's pretty deep right underneath the bridge. And at times we had a springboard on top of the bridge, and we had a springboard to the left over here. At one time, I remember I was wearing glasses and I was on this diving board right next to the end, ready to jump in, and somebody hollered, "Hey, you got your glasses on." I sure would have lost them had I dove in. And anyway, this road over here, it was elevated a number of times because I remember water would be over the road at times, and finally the road was elevated high enough that at least people can get through back and forth. And we used to haul a lot of loads of hay from that 30 acres. And fortunately, the horses never buckled to throw us into the creek.
Okay, thank you, Frank. Everything's set here, Marcy. All you do is, okay, it's on.
All you have to do is all you have to do is not drop this.
Use either one of the buttons. It's on. The green light. You should be looking at it. Is
I
it
see
on?
a green light.
Yep. Then
Blinking.
I know. That's what's been happening, and I can't figure it out. So you can bring it closer or farther. And what can you tell us here, Frank? We're down by the pipe.
Well, this road over here, at one time, it was decided that it had to be elevated. And I think, I'm not too sure, but I think that the paper mill footed the bill for this road. And there were about 8, 10, 12 teams of horses hauling rock. And I helped load some of the rock onto the wagons that are here in this road. Now, also, I know every foot of this land. I was hunting ducks here for years. And in that area, I know how many sloughs there are that are running east and west. In this area, I know how many sloughs there are that are running the opposite way. This area over here is what I used to call Joe Knietch's marshes. And I used to, which I did, I made one for myself, one for my brother, and one for Hank Fisher. And then after I had the skiffs all completed, I returned Grandpa's skiff, and I thanked him, and I thought that was really something, something great.
Oh, well, I think it was something to just make a skiff or a boat just from a sample, and have it float. You had to seal it, didn't you, pretty well?
Yeah. Yeah, anyway, one of the boats my brother has, and my boat, my nephew would like to have one, so I says, okay, take it. So my nephew's got that skiff.
So it's still in the family.
And one of these other ones, my brother